Chapter 7. Riley fought not to react in any way he'd noticed, fought not to reveal the sudden questions and fears tumbling through her mind. "I'm all thumbs with a curling iron," she said casually. "It happens so often I forget about it, usually." "Have you considered maybe not using a curling iron?" Ash inquired dryly. She turned her head back and met his gaze, smiling. "From time to time, but it's a girl thing, you see, and I clung to those when I was in the army." "What, were you afraid of anyone butch?" "That is not a politically correct term, and yes." Ash grinned at her. "Not a chance in hell. You are utterly and completely female, my love, from the top of your head down to the tips of your toes. It practically oozes from your pores." Riley ignored the lurch inside her at the unexpected endearment and pulled on a considering frown. "I'm not at all sure that's a compliment." "It's disarming, that's what it is. Dandy camouflage for the razor-sharp mind behind those big eyes." But you weren't disarmed, huh?" "I wasn't fooled," Ash said, "not like Jake was." A little surprised and very curious, she said, "You think he was fooled?" "I think he's badly underestimating you, and I think if he hadn't done that from the moment he met you, he might be here with you instead of me." "Right now," she said, "I really stepped in something between you two, didn't I?" "Maybe." He shifted position to lie more fully on his side, his head propped up on one hand and the other resting warmly on her stomach. "That had to happen eventually." "Why?" Ash's shoulders moved in a faint shrug. "Because letting Jake have what he wanted most of our lives was easy for me, until what he wanted was something I wanted more." Riley thought about that. "Me?" she half-guessed. "If you have to ask," he said, "you haven't been paying attention." She managed to laugh. "Oh, I was paying attention, just trying not to feel like a trophy between two jocks." "You know better than that." He leaned over to kiss her, the caress a lingering one. "At least as far as I'm concerned. This is not about Jake. This is about you and me." Riley was trying her best to think straight, despite the lips playing with hers. But if all Jake sees is that trophy, he might still want it. Then he'll have to learn a lesson I probably should have taught him when we were kids." Ash pushed the sheet back down so his seeking hand could find bare flesh. "He doesn't always get what he wants." Riley had thought she was completely exhausted, but her body was coming to life, and as her arms lifted to wrap themselves around his neck, she decided that she just might have the strength for this. As it turned out, she also had the strength left for a shower with Ash afterward, but by then her energy reserves were seriously low, and they both knew it. "I will get started on those omelets," he said, knotting a towel around his lean waist. "I'll get my hair dry and meet you in the kitchen. Sorry to be so high maintenance," she said. He tipped her chin up with a finger to kiss her. "You aren't," he said, and left her alone in the steamy bathroom. Riley finished wrapping herself in a towel, then held her hands out and watched them shake for a moment. Damn. Between the mental and emotional demands of a Swiss cheese memory and the physical demands of a relationship with Ash, she was using up energy at a rate far faster than normal even for her. Something was badly wrong, and she knew it. Shaking off yet another worry, she rummaged in the vanity drawers for a hand mirror and wiped off the steamy mirror over the sink so she could check out the back of her neck. It took a bit of maneuvering, and she ended up sitting on the vanity with her back to the big mirror while she held the hand mirror with one hand and pushed her hair completely off her neck with the other hand. It looked like a burn, as Ash had said, like two burns actually very close together, just below the hairline at the base of her skull. Even in the warm, steamy room, the chill that swept her body left gooseflesh in its wake. She had to concentrate fiercely in order to hold the hand mirror steady long enough to study the marks until she was certain of what she already knew. They were the marks of a stun gun, a taser, and what they very clearly showed was that someone had held a gun to the back of her neck and discharged an electrical current directly into her body, into the base of her brain. It took less than 10 minutes to blow dry her short hair, and that didn't allow Riley enough time to think much past the numb realization that, in all likelihood, a killer had stood over her twitching body and emptied into it from a weapon meant to incapacitate a target a potentially deadly amount of electricity. Riley had used a taser. She had also been tasered herself. She knew what the weapon was capable of and what its normal after effects were. There was nothing normal about this. The marks on her neck indicated sustained contact with both voltage and amperage considerably higher than the manufacturer had ever intended for the device. The question was, had her attacker deliberately used an amped-up stun gun knowing it could be a lethal weapon? And if so, was she alive by design or only by accident? Either way, the attack could explain her headaches and the memory loss and the dulled or absent senses. It could even explain her unusually frequent need for more fuel. An electrical jolt to the brain could scramble a lot of things in the human body. It could also cause a hell of a lot of problems, some worse than those she was coping with now. And the fact that those problems hadn't yet manifested themselves didn't mean they wouldn't. Great, that's just great. Somebody tried to fry my brain, probably tried to kill me, and he's still out there running around loose with a big advantage. He knew who she was, and she didn't have a clue who he was. With her hair dry and no more excuses to linger in the bathroom, Riley went into the bedroom to put on one of her customary sleep shirts. She took a moment to sort through their scattered clothing and lay Ash's more neatly over a chair, and despite everything felt a flicker of amusement when she picked up the sexy underwear she had, at the last minute while dressing for their date, chosen to wear. She doubted he'd even notice it. With that wry thought in mind, she chose a football jersey sleep shirt, exchanged her towel for it, and headed for the kitchen. You can think about all this later, figure out what's going on later. Right now, you just have to get through tonight. You have to act normal and be Ash Prescott's summer lover. If that's what she was. Or maybe she was, despite his denial, the trophy he had taken away from his boyhood rival. There was a cheerful thought. Not. Perfect timing, Ash said as she joined him. He was transferring the two halves of a large omelet onto 2 plates on the work island. He had already set out silverware and napkins, as well as poured 2 glasses of wine. Riley took her place on one of the stools at the breakfast bar and looked at him with lifted brows. Wine? You know that makes me sleepy. She hoped he knew. Yeah, well, I think maybe you need to sleep. Ash put the pan in the sink and brought the plates to the bar. Riley left her brows raised and waited. He was frowning just a little, and before she realized what he was going to do, he grasped her wrist and lifted it slightly so they could both see her fingers trembling. Your tank's not just empty, you're running on fumes. After finishing a sizable meal about 3 hours ago. A gentleman wouldn't talk about how much I eat, she said, keeping her tone light as she reclaimed her hand and took a sip of her wine. That's not what this is about, and you know it. Was it the scene in the woods? Is that what took so much out of you? Well, scenes like that do, usually. She started eating, hoping the calories would kickstart her sluggish mind. Oh, I'm in fine shape, I am. If I was half as responsible as I'm supposed to be, I'd have Bishop recall me to Quantico tonight. Because of the clairvoyance? Riley was only a little surprised he knew about that. It wasn't something she often confided on short acquaintance, or even long acquaintance in most cases, but the man was in her bed after all. And at least his knowledge answered one of the questions she'd been asking herself. One down, at least a dozen more to go. She nodded. It takes more energy, yeah, especially a murder so horrific. Everybody around me is tense, frightened, sickened, and usually worried about their nearest and dearest. Sorting through all that takes a lot of energy. He was still frowning, still intent. So this happens whenever you work on a case? To varying degrees. I tried harder than usual today, probably because I wasn't getting anything. That happens sometimes too. Information she hoped would head off at least some of his questions. Ash picked up his fork and began to eat, but after several bites said, "I had the impression you used your abilities as just another investigative tool." "Generally, they often give me an edge in an investigation, but not always." "This is very good, by the way." She indicated her plate and the omelet, already half finished. "Sure, keep wolfing down food. That'll solve everything." "High calorie," he said in a tone of sudden amusement. "I put in extra cheese." Riley had to laugh, albeit without much amusement of her own. "Sorry, I didn't expect to get involved with anyone this summer, much less during a full-blown investigation." "Stop saying you're sorry. Feeding you is not a problem, believe me." He smiled, then added casually, "So, business and pleasure don't mix too well in your world?" "They both take energy." Riley lifted her glass in a small salute. "One more than the other sometimes." "You didn't answer the question." It was a potential out for her, maybe. One less pretense she'd have to keep up. If she told him the investigation would demand all her energy, all her attention, then maybe he'd step back out of her personal life for the duration. Except that she didn't think he would. Or maybe you just don't want to believe he would. Finally, she said, "It's never come up for me, so I don't know. We'll find out, I guess." He gazed at her steadily for a long moment, then smiled again. "I'll order a couple more cases of those power bars." "Good idea," she said. The wine had its usual effect on her, and she was yawning hugely by the time she crawled into bed a few minutes later. "Probably should have checked the door," she murmured. "I did. All locked." Ash got into bed beside her, but before turning out the lamp on the nightstand, paused to reach into the top drawer. "Here, I know you won't rest easy until this is under the pillow." Riley blinked at the gun he was holding casually by its barrel, then took it from him. She checked it automatically to make sure the safety was still on, then slid it underneath her pillow. She always went to sleep on her right side, a habit that made her turn her back to him as she lay down. It was clearly a routine he was accustomed to, since he turned out the lamp and settled down behind her without comment. Close behind her. He kissed the nape of her neck just below the burn and said, "Try to sleep past dawn, okay? I think you need to." "Night," she murmured in response. "Night, Riley." Her body relaxed because she told it to. Her breathing was slow and even. Her eyes were closed. She had never been more wide awake in her life. The realization had been slow in coming, but now it took root in her admittedly sluggish mind and began to grow into at least one horrible possibility. She always slept with her weapon under her pillow, always, ever since a very nasty experience with a pre-dawn burglar nearly 10 years ago. But very few people knew that. She had awakened the previous afternoon fully dressed except for her shoes, with her gun under the pillow as always. There were only two possible routes to that destination as far as Riley could see. Both of them started with her leaving the house, after telling Ash she wanted time alone, undoubtedly armed because she certainly would have been, going to do whatever it was she'd gone to do, and in the process getting surprised or otherwise blindsided by someone with a stun gun. After that, either she had, after being stunned for gosh knew how long, managed to get herself back home and to her bed, too addled to remove her blood-stained clothing, but able to kick off her shoes and remember where her gun should go, or her attacker had brought her home, removed her shoes, and put her gun under her pillow because he'd known she would expect to find it there whenever she woke up. Shit. The field of suspects, if that turned out to be the case, had suddenly gotten very, very small. Ash knew where she kept her gun at night. So did Gordon. If anyone else here knew, Riley would be very surprised. But maybe someone else did know. Hell, maybe everyone knew. Oh gosh, what else don't I remember? Her car had been here, the keys in her bag. Had she driven wherever it was she'd gone last night? Could she have driven back here, suffering the after effects of near electrocution? No evidence of blood in her car, but 3 miles to the bridge, assuming she'd gone over to the mainland, surely she hadn't walked. I'm assuming whatever happened didn't happen here on the island. Why am I assuming that? because the altar, if that's what it had been used for, was on the mainland, because a tortured and murdered man's body had been discovered there, and because she found it almost impossible to believe that a second, totally separate violent event had taken place in this small community on the same night. Rational, reasonable, probably right. Probably. Riley? Oh shit, I can't even fake it anymore? She murmured. Why are you still awake? He nuzzled the back of her neck. I thought you go out like a light. Just thinking, I guess. About what? The murder? Yeah, it wasn't a lie. Exactly. Occupational hazard. Without turning her to face him, Ash gathered her into his arms. Can I talk you into letting it go until tomorrow? Or is this something else I should get used to? What could she tell him? How much could she tell him? How far could she trust him? Riley was conscious of an unfamiliar desperation, and it was a feeling she did not like, especially when it caused her to blurt, I'm different, when there's a case. So it's not just about using more energy, he said after a moment. No, there's that too, but I pretty much live the job. I get obsessed. She tried to put a shrug into her voice. My boss says it's part of what makes me a good investigator. Other people have indicated that I can be distant or difficult to connect with whenever I'm working on a case. Forewarned is forearmed. You have a right to know. His arms tightened around her. Riley, I understand how our work can drive us. You know how far mine drove me. All the way back to my childhood home, where being the district attorney is barely a full-time job. You can allow your job to consume you. She wished she remembered his story. She really did. She had a feeling it was a vitally important piece of this puzzle she was in, but all she could say was, a man's dead, Ash. Shouldn't I be bothered by that? Shouldn't you? I'm just saying you won't be any good to the investigation or yourself if you don't get some rest. You're right, of course. His arms tightened around her again, and there was something inexpressibly soothing in his voice when he murmured, Tomorrow is soon enough to begin to obsess. Go to sleep, Riley. He hadn't answered her questions, and that bothered her more than she wanted to admit, even to herself. At the same time, her body was relaxing against his, for real this time, and she was growing sleepy once again. Exhaustion, almost certainly, catching up with her. But it was more than that. And even as her fragmented thoughts began to settle, a last nagging realization followed her into sleep. Despite everything, even her own doubts, here in this man's arms, she felt safe. And for a woman who had learned a long, long time ago that safety was, at best, an illusion, that was terrifying. In an unusually grim tone, Gordon said, Yeah, I'd say this was from a taser, and a juiced-up one at that. Riley smoothed her short hair over the burns and turned to face him. I was pretty sure, just wanted a second opinion. Have you reported this to Bishop? Not yet. Jesus Christ on a crutch, Riley. I know. But I also know what Bishop will say, and I don't want to be recalled. Can't just cut and run, Gordon, not yet. Look, if whoever attacked me had wanted to kill me, I'd be dead. You don't know that. It's more likely he left you for dead, and that crazy messed up brain of yours kept you alive against the odds. It was a good point, and more than possible. Like all the psychics on the team, her brain had a higher than normal amount of electrical activity going on at any given time, so it very well might not have responded as the attacker had expected to an added jolt. Maybe, she hesitated, then confessed. I had a nightmarish scenario running last night where the guy stunned me and then brought me home and put me to bed thinking I'd wake up and not know anything had happened. You mean when you woke up covered with blood, you wouldn't think anything had happened? I didn't think about that part until this morning, after about 3 cups of coffee and a wonderful breakfast courtesy of Ash. Gordon eyed her consideringly. You really aren't firing on all cylinders, babe, in case you didn't know that. Why do you men always use car metaphors, she demanded, even though she'd used the very same one herself in describing her condition to Bishop. Don't change the subject. Riley sighed. I'll tell Bishop everything when I report in this afternoon. I can't justify keeping any of it to myself, not with a man dead. I'll just have to hope I can convince him to leave me here. But in the meantime, I'm headed out to the sheriff's department, where I hope there will be statements, photos, and a postmortem report I can take a look at. What do you expect to see? I don't know. Probably nothing I couldn't figure out from the crime scene, but maybe I missed something. Gordon was frowning. I gather his spooky senses are still AWOL. She nodded, which makes more sense today than it did yesterday, now that I at least know what happened to me. Even so, I have a pretty good hunch that Bishop will tell me nobody else on the team has experienced a jolt of electricity straight into the base of the brain. I don't recall reading that in any of the unit's case histories, and I think it would have been there, highlighted, underlined, with an asterisk. Yeah, I get it, which means I'm in unexplored territory here and pretty much on my own. Who knows what is scrambled or short-circuited inside my head and what the after effects might be. Wanna tell me again why you aren't going to see a doctor? Because there's nothing a doctor would do except probably run tests. Because I'm functional, I don't even have a headache today, or at least not much of one. Whatever that jolt did to my brain, well, let's just say I doubt they have a magic little pill to fix me. It could be permanent, the memory loss and the damage to your senses. Could be. Riley drew a deep breath and released it slowly. Hell, that may be more likely than not. If an electrical jolt can trigger latent psychic abilities, and we know it can, then it's reasonable to suppose one could just as easily short-circuit or even destroy them. How you feel about that? All my life I've counted on those extra senses to give me an edge when I needed it, when somebody else was bigger, stronger, smarter, faster, or just meaner. Without them, I don't know if I'm good enough to do my job. Chapter 8. I don't think you have to worry about that, Gordon said. I've seen you accomplish plenty without the spooky senses. Thanks for the vote of confidence. Wish it helped the queasy feeling in the pit of my stomach. Maybe changing the subject, Gordon asked, how'd the date go last night? She knew he wasn't asking for details and wouldn't. He just wanted to know if her evening with Ash had changed anything. It was an answer she didn't have. It was fine. Riley hesitated, then said, tell me I can trust him, Gordon. Promise me I can trust him. Wish I could, babe, but I don't know the man well enough to promise anything. All I know is what I hear, the little bit I've seen for myself, and for what it's worth, that's mostly good. I'd want him on my side in a fight. My gut says I could depend on him to watch my back, but we both know that don't mean he couldn't be a bastard to the woman sharing his bed. I don't think that isn't what I'm afraid of. What then? Afraid he carved up a living human being out in the woods? I don't think he could do that, but I don't know he didn't. Gordon, I'm used to getting a sense of people, deeper than reading expressions or voices or watching what they do. I know who I can trust and who I can't, almost always. But it's more than that. It's a sense of who they are, deep down inside. With Ash, I have the nagging feeling there was something very important I sensed about him. Something I really need to know now. And whatever it was, I can't feel it, can't know it anymore. It's gone. Maybe not gone for good. Maybe just beyond reach right now. Yeah, maybe. As well as he knew where Gordon wasn't psychic, and because he'd never lost a sense, he couldn't understand what it really meant to suddenly be without something you had depended on to help you steer your way through an often hostile world. Riley was only just beginning to realize it herself. The queasy sensation in her stomach intensified. After a moment, Gordon said, you got involved with him, and I have a hard time believing you'd have done that if you'd sensed anything rotten inside him. I hope you're right. Riley looked out over the peaceful summertime scenery visible from Gordon's dock, and wished fleetingly that she could join the fishing party he was expecting any time now, and just sail off for a few mindless hours. That sounded a lot more appealing than looking at autopsy photos. Riley? She looked at him, then straightened away from the bench she'd been half leaning against. I'd better go. Jake expected me at the sheriff's department half an hour ago. I got a friend can take this party out. Grateful for the implicit offer, she nevertheless shook her head. And we'd tell Jake what? That I felt threatened enough to bring along an army buddy to watch my back in broad daylight? I'm an FBI agent on vacation, and he's asked me to advise on an investigation, all nice and casual, so why would I suddenly feel the need for a bodyguard? Nobody else knows about what happened Sunday night, and I want to keep it that way, at least until I figure out a little more of what's going on around here. Whoever attacked you knows what happened, and if he left you for dead, he's going to be mighty surprised if he sees you walking around like nothing happened. Mighty surprised and mighty worried about how much you know. I've been thinking about that, and I'm not so sure he'd be worried at all. As far as I can tell, I never even drew my weapon. Can't be sure about that, but I certainly never fired it, and I was attacked from behind, obviously taken by surprise. Not bragging or anything, but it's not all that easy to take me by surprise. I would have said, yeah, so chances are I never got so much as a glimpse at whoever was holding the taser. I think if he, or she, I suppose, believed I'd seen or heard anything that might be a danger to him or her, he or she, oh hell, he would have made damn sure I was dead. That's an awfully big assumption to hang your life on, babe. Yeah, well, she gestured to the holstered automatic she wore easily on one hip. From now on, I'm openly armed most of the time, and as far as most people around here are concerned, officially on duty. A decision she had made after Ash left that morning. I didn't want it to be this way, because it means some people are going to be less likely to talk to me. But after thinking about it, I decided the risks of appearing unarmed outweighed the benefits. Especially with you being a little bitty thing. Yes, I know I don't look very threatening. A gun tends to make people think twice. With my other edge gone, that's one I need. Gordon pursed his lips. I'll be happy to spread the word you're hell on wheels in a bare-fisted fight. It's not like it'd be a lie. Don't go out of your way, Riley shrugged, but if the subject comes up, why not? Whoever the guy is, I want him to get the idea that taking me by surprise the second time won't be so easy. She held up a hand when he would have spoken to say, which also means I won't be going out at night by myself. Not again. Call me, he said. It was me got you involved in all this, so you damn well better call me next time. With some feeling, she said, believe me when I say I do not want to go up against the bastard stung on a second time. If I need to do any investigating at night, I'll call you. Any hour. I know, thanks. Riley took a step toward the walkway that would lead her around to the street side of Gordon's house, then paused and looked at him with a frown. Gordon, what's happening in Charleston? He looked blank for a moment, then said, oh, you mean the murders? If that's what's happening. Murders? Yeah, they got a serial killer, apparently, a real mean one, leaving his victims pretty much in pieces. Been at it a while, I gather, but the cops just put it together about a week ago, at least according to the Charleston papers. Bastards targeting tourists, men only, and everybody's pretty tore up about it all. I guess so. Riley felt suddenly cold in the hot July sunshine. Can't be. Not the same M.O. And there must be 100 serials operating right now in this country. Gordon bent to check a bait bucket, adding, the papers have been calling him the collector. Seems he's been leaving a perfect coin on every one of the bodies. Well, not on the bodies, inside the bodies. After he finishes cutting them up, guess they could just as easily call him the slot machine killer. But, Riley, you okay? She wondered if the sun had gone behind a cloud, if that's why she felt so cold, why everything seemed dark all at once and she could barely feel Gordon's big hand on her arm. Except that she knew the sky was cloudless and the sun was hot, that it was a normal summer day. Normal. That was it. That was the lie. Because it's not normal. Nothing is normal, not if he's hunting again. A ghost can't hunt, and that's what he's supposed to be. He's dead. I killed him. 2.5 years previously. It was an unexpectedly cool night in New Orleans, which suited Riley. She liked heat when she was on the beach or at a pool, but otherwise not so much, especially at night, and most especially on a night when she might have to move fast. Being distracted by the sense assaulting chaos of the French Quarter at night was bad enough without also coping with sticky clothing. What little she was wearing anyway. "Hey, honey, how about a date?" "I'm off duty," she said. He blinked in surprise and nervously fingered a strand of alien head Mardi Gras beads that were adding a nicely tacky flourish to his colorful shorts and floral shirt. "Oh, nah, don't be like that, honey. I can pay for a room." "I'm sure you can, champ, but I'm just not interested." She kept her tone bored and her gaze moving. The last thing she needed tonight was to get picked up for solicitation, and she'd been on the watch all evening for cops patrolling the street on foot. It made the job she was here to do even more difficult, and for at least the 10th time she regretted the skimpy clothing that made her blend right into the festive crowd, but also made her a target of unwanted attention. "He'll never notice me, but damn it, every straight guy between 15 and 65 has. Can make a bloody fortune. Probably should have picked an outfit closer to tourist and further away from hooker." Not that there was much distance between those two seeming opposites, not with today's skimpy summer fashions. Besides which, she wanted to look more like a native than a tourist, and clearly had achieved that goal. Realizing that the hopeful would-be John was still standing there, Riley allowed an edge to creep into her voice. "Look, it's my night off, okay? Find another playmate." He hesitated, scanning her up and down with clear disappointment, then sighed and moved on. Riley decided that she obviously looked too available, just hovering. So she began to stroll slowly along the sidewalk, allowing the moving crowd to carry her. It had to be New Orleans, she was certain of it. She had followed the killer from Memphis to Little Rock, the step behind him as she'd been for months, studying the butchered bodies he left for the police to find, trying to climb inside his mind far enough to do more than guess where he'd strike next. Then, in Little Rock, looking at the bloody scene of his latest murder, something inside her head had whispered, "Birmingham." She had hesitated, questioning her instincts, her clairvoyance, whatever was trying to guide her. But she had been right. His next victim died in Birmingham, and Riley had arrived just in time to view yet another scene of butchery. By then, her own anger at being once again too late to help the victim had nearly blocked her. But even through that fury, she had heard the whisper, "New Orleans. I'll be in New Orleans, little girl. Meet you there." She hadn't told Bishop that part when she reported it. It had probably been her imagination anyway. That's what she convinced herself. Because she wasn't a telepath and couldn't possibly have heard the killer's voice in her mind. So all she told her boss was that she felt sure New Orleans would be the next stalking ground. So here she was, a month later, and so far, nothing. It was almost impossible to be bored in New Orleans, but Riley knew her patience was wearing thin. This killer had struck at least 9 times. Bishop felt there were probably earlier victims not found or not connected, and Bishop was usually right about stuff like that. And all she was sure of after months of exhaustive effort was that her target was a salesman or traveling rep of some kind. "It makes sense," Bishop agreed. "He knows the cities and towns he visits, so he'd know where to hunt. All the local hangouts. It wouldn't take him more than a few nights to be able to recognize the regulars. And pick his target, yeah. But why family men? Guys stopping for a beer or two on the way home from work. Jealousy? Because they have what he doesn't? Maybe. Jealousy, resentment, envy, or just rage. Because it's also unfair, because they're normal, and he's not." "You think he knows that? Knows he isn't normal?" "Some part of him knows," Bishop hesitated, then added soberly, "I hope that's the part you're tapping into, Riley, because the other part of him is black as the inside of hell, pure evil, and it's not a place you ever want to get caught up in." "I'm not a telepath." "No, you're an ultra-sensitive clairvoyant, and you've gotten obsessed with this guy, which means you're letting his work seep into your mind, your emotions, and into your very pores. It's dangerous. I warned you, don't get too close." "You knew I would," she said, and it wasn't quite an accusation, "when this started, when you recruited me." Yeah, I know. I knew. Hearing or sensing what might have been a touch of regret in him, she said, "It's okay, I knew it too." "I wish that helped," Bishop said. "Be careful, Riley. Be very, very careful." 3 weeks after that phone conversation, Riley was tense, edgy, and getting a little too familiar with her surroundings. At night on Bourbon Street, it was noisy and colorful and held a particular flavor no other city on earth could match. People filled the street, some of them lurching or staggering, their 80-proof laughter scraping along her nerves, the spicy aromas of Cajun cooking mixed uneasily with that of the musty old buildings and cigarette smoke and people. Occasionally the breeze changed, and the muddy smell of the river was added to the rest. A space had been cleared about halfway down for a juggler to entertain the crowd, his practice patter loud and cheerful. The music booming from the clubs and strip bars lining the street clashed with the mournful wail of a folk singer, his guitar case open for contributions on the sidewalk before him. And under the bright lights of the street, the appearance of the crowd ran the gamut from a few garish costumes apparently left over from Mardi Gras to men and women in business suits. In between lay everything from jeans and t-shirts to the brief skirts or shorts and halter tops of the teenagers and hookers. Riley was trying to close out all that, trying to focus her mind only on her prey. "You're here, you bastard. The cops don't know it yet, don't know there's a hunter prowling their streets. These people don't know, but I know. I can feel you, like an itch on the back of my neck. Smell you like the sour stench of cheap cologne and old sweat. And need. You smell like need. You need to kill tonight, don't you? It's been too long since the last one. Why have you waited so long? You never did before. 3 weeks max, never a whole month. Why wait a month this time? Is it me? Do you know about me? Can you feel me the same way I can feel you?" A peculiar dizziness swept over Riley, and her step faltered. She blinked at the sea of moving people, then managed to make her way far enough out of the flow to lean a hand against a building. She realized she was gagging, that there was an awful metallic taste in her mouth. She put her free hand up to touch her lips, and when she looked at it, could see blood. Her probing tongue could find no wound in her mouth, no reason for there to be blood. There was no pain, so why was... The smell of it was suddenly thick in her nostrils, and for an instant she was sure her hands were slick with the viscous stuff, the knife in her grasp, held securely only because he knew what he was doing. Oh, Christ, it's him. Riley realized she was moving, only when she passed the police cars blocking off the end of Bourbon Street as they did every night. She didn't stop, didn't even hesitate. As the smell and taste of blood grew stronger, her pace quickened until finally she was running, away from the crowds and towards something she didn't want to find. At some point she drew her weapon from her shoulder bag. She was hardly conscious of doing it. She was only aware of running, faster and faster, her lungs burning and her side aching, when finally she found it. Him. What was left of him. She was standing at a construction site, partially cleared for a new building, but holding nothing yet, except huge earth-moving machines, looming still and silent all around her, stoic, inhuman witnesses to the atrocities committed here. There was a street light just close enough for her to see what he had left this time. The remains of a man's body, naked and bloody, but only part of it. There was nothing from the navel down except the grisly pulp of hacked-up internal organs. Too late. Riley was too late. Again. And the taste of blood was still in her mouth. Missed again, didn't you? But don't worry, little girl. You'll get another chance. I'll see you in Mobile. She could have sworn she heard the echo of mocking laughter, but it wasn't on the faint breeze blowing around her. It was inside her own mind, and this time she knew it wasn't her imagination. Present day. We don't know it's him, not for certain, Bishop said. Riley sat in her car at the sheriff's department, the cell phone to her ear, and struggled to keep her voice even and calm. He's leaving coins, right? Mint condition coins inside the victims. That shouldn't have leaked to the press. It didn't leak before, we both know that, which means this killer isn't a copycat. Bishop's voice held all the calm Riley's lacked and then some. What we both know is that hundreds of people worked on the previous investigations over time, so we can't be sure information wasn't leaked, even if it didn't make the newspapers. He's dead, Bishop. I killed him. I believe you did. Riley realized that with her free hand, she was gently rubbing the burn on her neck and made herself stop. One of us needs to take a look at what they've got. Be sure. He didn't let her finish. We haven't been invited, Riley. And since our previous investigation was officially closed and our killer officially taken off the books, what's happening in Charleston right now is being viewed as an entirely new case, most likely a copycat. A full-blown serial killer just popping up out of nowhere? If his ritual is established, then he's killed before. Yes, which is why I've reached out to a cop friend of mine in Charleston. He's getting duplicate reports to me for an unofficial profile. I'll know soon enough if this is someone we've seen before. You mean we'll know soon enough if I missed? There was a bitter taste in her mouth, not unlike the blood in New Orleans. You didn't miss. You never miss. You fired your weapon and hit John Henry Price at least 3 times full in the chest, and he went down. They never found the body. That river never gave up its dead. She drew a breath and let it out slowly. Very convenient thing, wasn't it? He just happened to fall into the river after I shot him. That he ran out onto that dock, but past the tied-up boats all the way to the end. What if he planned the whole thing, Bishop? He could have. We both know he was smart enough. What if he just wanted to stop for a while, get us off his back and off his trail, and he knew the only way was if we believed he was dead? Riley, you didn't get there until later. None of the telepaths or mediums were there to tell us for sure if he was gone. Just me. And all I could feel, all I could sense then was terror, because he'd gotten so damn close. Because I knew he'd been the one to crawl into my head instead of the other way around. It happens sometimes when the predator we're tracking has some active or even latent ability. And you warned me, I know. It's been nearly 2.5 years, Bishop said quietly. If he was alive, he would have been killing. He could have been more careful, picked victims who wouldn't be missed, hidden or destroyed the bodies when he was done with them. You said yourself at the time that going public the way he did, when he did, leaving the bodies to be found, was because he wanted a challenge, because it had gotten too easy for him. He wanted the world to watch him, to see how clever he was. Maybe the challenge now is to convince everybody else he's not the same killer we tracked for so long. Maybe that's why he's hunting tourists rather than locals. Maybe, Bishop said at last, but we have some time. This killer is apparently on a monthly schedule, and his most recent victim was discovered only a few days ago. He's killed 1 victim a month for the past 6 months. The police caught on early because of the coin signature, but managed to keep that bit out of the press until the most recent victim last week. Political decision. Didn't want to hurt tourism. Exactly. But word's out now, and they're getting plenty of heat for not warning their visitors. Not the best example of Southern hospitality on record. Hardly. Riley frowned. If they're taking heat, then chances are good they'll call for help sooner rather than later. Yes, I'm counting on it. As to whether this killer really is someone we've seen before, I won't know anything until I see those reports. In the meantime, you have trouble enough where you are now. He was right, and she knew it. Riley tried to focus, to put that other killer out of her mind, but it was almost impossible. She had never felt more vulnerable in her life, and even the faintest possibility that John Henry Price was still alive and on the hunt less than 50 miles away had turned the queasiness in the pit of her stomach to churning fear. Even on the other end of a cell phone connection, Bishop didn't miss that. Riley, what else is going on? Has the situation there worsened? She didn't want to, but knew she had no choice, so Riley made her report matter-of-factly. She told him about the murder and about the evidence that she herself had been attacked with possibly lethal intent. And before he could say a word, she finished with, "Don't recall me, Bishop." "Why the hell not?" His voice was grim. Riley, I have absolutely no idea what a direct jolt of electricity could do to a psychic's brain, not under those conditions, but I can pretty much promise you there's not much chance of a reversal of whatever damage was inflicted. You mean I might never recover my memories, never get my senses back to normal, any of them? That's exactly what I mean. It's more than a chance, Riley, it's a probability. Electrical energy affects us. It can strengthen our abilities, change them, or destroy them. She drew a breath, then said, that's all the more reason I should stay here. Look, I know it sounds irrational, but every instinct I have is telling me that if I leave, what's happened to me will be permanent, that I'll never get back the lost time or the lost senses. Riley, Bishop, please, it's more than just a case now. Somebody attacked me, maybe tried to kill me, and the same person most probably killed a man on the same night, tortured and decapitated him. It might be his blood that was all over me, and I don't even know his name, not yet. I have to stay here. I have to work this investigation. Whatever answers I can find here, whatever answers I can find will be here, not studying ink blots for some doctor at Quantico. He was silent for a moment, then said, tell me you aren't asking to stay just to be close to Charleston, in case. I can't, she admitted. That's part of it. Because if it is Price, I'm the only one who got close once before. I'm the one you'd have to send when they ask for our help. The last time nearly destroyed you, Riley, with all your senses and memories intact. I know, and I'm not looking for a repeat performance, believe me. I don't need a profiler to tell me he would be really pissed at anyone who'd taken him out of the game even temporarily. Pissed isn't out for revenge, and in a major way. That was his nature, right? Vengeful? Among other things. Riley didn't want to think about those other things, so we both hope there's a copycat in Charleston, but whether I have to face the worst possibility or not, I'll be no good to myself or to the SCU if I can't fix whatever that bastard with the stun gun broke. Which is all the more reason to return to Quantico. Riley hadn't wanted to, but ended the argument with a simple fact neither of them could dispute because both were cops. Memories or not, I did something on Sunday night that left me covered with blood. Maybe the blood of a murdered man. Until I know for sure, I can't leave. Chapter 9. Leah Wells had wanted to be a cop since she was 8 years old, maybe even longer. But she remembered back to 8. She had turned her dollhouse into a jail, imprisoning 3 dolls, 2 teddy bears, and a ninja action figure borrowed from her brother when he hadn't been looking. The ninja had committed the most heinous act. He kidnapped Malibu Barbie and held her for ransom. The battle to capture him and free the hostage had been intense. Leah's mother was somewhat bemused by all this, rightly fearing the childhood games heralded a less traditional life than the one that she at least hoped for. But Leah, instead of spending her college years joining a sorority and pursuing a degree in child psychology or some such, had studied criminal psychology and criminal investigation, interning with the State Bureau of Investigation. But if her mother had been disappointed in her daughter's choice of careers, Leah herself was somewhat disillusioned by 4 years spent on the police force in Columbia. She discovered she did not like being a big city cop. Too much violence, too many depressing situations with unhappy, tragic outcomes. Gordon said she picked the wrong career for a woman who believed happily ever after was the way stories were supposed to end, but the truth was that Leah enjoyed the work, mostly. She enjoyed helping people. So when Columbia turned out to be too depressing for her, she decided a beach community would undoubtedly be more cheerful, less violent, and provide great fringe benefits, especially since she was that rare redhead who tanned instead of freckled. She had landed in the Hazard County Sheriff's Department by virtue of a pin. With the list before her of law enforcement agencies along the southeastern coast looking for experienced officers, she closed her eyes and stabbed the paper with an open safety pin. Hazard County it was. Maybe a dumb way to plan a career, let alone a life, but it had worked out well for Leah. Because she liked her work now and loved the beach community lifestyle, and she had a man she was fairly crazy about as well, icing on the cake. And now, she said to Riley, bringing her story to the present and sounding aggrieved, some murderous fiend has to come along and ruin paradise. Yeah, murderous fiends can really screw up your day, Riley said gravely. She was sitting on a corner of the conference table, idly swinging one foot, waiting for Sheriff Ballard to meet them there with the post-mortem report. In the meantime, she had gotten Leah talking with a simple question or two about herself. Leah sighed, "Oh, you know what I mean. It's not like I'm taking this murder lightly. Every time I close my eyes, I see that poor guy hanging out there in the woods. I feel queasy and scared, because if the maniac who killed him isn't a summer visitor, then chances are he's somebody I know." Riley took another bite of the power bar she'd been eating, then said, "For what it's worth, I'd be surprised if this killer was a summer visitor." Shit, why? Because if he or they practice actual satanic rites, it's not something you usually just take on the road when you go on vacation, not the extreme rituals at any rate. Plus, secrecy is a really big factor, and that site was awfully public. So it could have been, a fake ritual? Maybe a smokescreen to hide the real motive behind the murder? And if that's the case, if somebody is using the trappings of the occult to throw us off the scent, then the reason is most likely to deflect attention away from someone who would otherwise be a logical suspect in the straightforward murder of this man. Leah thought about that, but we can't know if he had any enemies locally until we know who he was. Yeah, so identifying him has to be a priority. It is, but so far, nada. The doc serving as our medical examiner gave us a preliminary report last night. He didn't find any identifying marks on the body, no old scars, no tattoos, no birthmarks. We ran his prints a second time just to be sure, but still no luck. I wouldn't expect his prints to be on file, Riley said. Any particular reason why? Neatly folding her empty power bar wrapper into a narrower and narrower strip, Riley said, because the head was removed. Leah couldn't help grimacing, but said, And so I've never heard of an occult ritual where the head of a victim was removed and taken away. And I can't see why that would be done other than to delay identification. That being the case, if the killer had any reason to suppose the guy's prints were on file, and obviously not being the squeamish kind, he would have destroyed the fingertips, hacked them off, or maybe used a blowtorch. Leah cleared her throat. It's not a nice world where you live, is it? Riley looked slightly surprised and smiled a bit ruefully. I guess not. I don't think about it that way most of the time. It's just a job. Well, more or less. I meet some great people through my work. I have some interesting experiences, not all of them negative. I travel a lot. I do work I feel is important. No question about that. Leah lowered her voice slightly, even though they were alone in the conference room. And you have a way to use the psychic stuff where it really means something, instead of working in a carnival sideshow or on one of those called the psychic hotlines. One of the most amazing psychics I know spent years in a carnival telling fortunes. I didn't mean, Riley waved that away. Oh, I know. But you're right, for some psychics, maybe most psychics, there aren't many ways to carve out a decent living using those abilities. That's assuming you even can use the abilities, and lots can't. Can't control them, you mean? Most of us can't control them, or at least not reliably. My boss says that if ever a psychic is born who can control his or her abilities, the whole world will change. He's probably right about that. But that psychic won't be you, huh? No. I've been using my abilities as long as I can remember, and it's still hit or miss. Even if my concentration is perfect and my energy level optimal, I may not get a damn thing. Other times, I'm not even trying and get blindsided by a dump of information or emotions. You get emotions? Other people's emotions? Leah hadn't intended to sound wary, but heard it in her voice. Riley frowned at the empty wrapper that was now a thin folded strip. She tied it neatly into a knot. Sometimes. Not the way an empath would, feeling what somebody else feels. It's just knowing somebody's angry or sad or whatever, even if it's all locked inside and they aren't showing any of it. Leah studied the other woman, wondering what that must be like, to have that window into other people. Not that she wanted to know firsthand. She had enough trouble sorting through her own thoughts and emotions without adding in someone else's. It wasn't something that appeared to disturb Riley. She was a curiously serene woman, Leah thought. Even out in the woods yesterday, in the midst of that horrific scene, her matter had been calm and matter-of-fact. And today, the gun on her hip was worn casually with jeans and a late summer top. She did not look like an FBI agent. Then again, Leah could imagine her in an army uniform only because Gordon had a couple of pictures of them together. Don't let those big eyes and that sweet voice fool you, he had warned Leah with a grin. Riley hasn't got an innocent bone in her body. She's seen battle, and she's seen the world, and she can take care of herself on any patch of it fate might see fit to send her to. Hell, I wouldn't want to tangle with her, armed or unarmed. Something to bear in mind, Leah thought. Does being psychic really help, she asked. I mean, in an investigation? Riley tied the plastic wrapper into a second knot, frowned at it as if wondering why she'd done that, and dropped it into an ashtray on the table behind her. Sometimes she hesitated, then met the other woman's gaze and said, "But maybe not this time. Just so you know, I'm more than a little off my game right now." Ash, Leah guessed. Riley was clearly surprised. Why would you think that? Just relating, I suppose. Leah laughed. When I was falling for Gordon, I once came to work wearing 2 different shoes. I thought the guys would never let me live it down. Riley smiled, but her eyes remained intent, questioning. Interesting how clearly that came across, Leah thought. That silent question. Without actually intending to, she found herself offering an answer. Ash is a very intense guy. Everybody knows that. I just figured he was probably even more intense behind closed doors, so to speak. He's a little overwhelming, Riley said rather cautiously. I bet. Rumor has it he left the Atlanta DA's office because he couldn't control his temper. Really? Leah shrugged. Oh, you know rumors. I've never seen any sign of that sort of thing personally. But it's hard to miss the guy's intensity. I keep coming back to that word, but it does seem to fit, doesn't it? Yeah, it does. Shaking her head, Leah said, rotten timing, all this. It looked like things were going really well for you two. That we found out all the supposed occult stuff was just nonsense and Gordon was fretting for nothing. Now, with this murder, everybody's tense and jumpy, and none of us can think much about anything else. Occult or not, something sure as hell going on. Yeah. It was pretty obvious yesterday that Ash wasn't happy about you working the case. You two get that straightened out? Yes, I told him I'd be working the case. Leah laughed. Atta girl. It's probably good for the man to find out you won't be at his beck and call. I think he already knew that. The sheriff came into the room just then, which effectively put an end to any further confidences, at least for the moment. Well, we've got paperwork, he said, and the crime scene photos are printing out now. Riley, turns out we do have some sort of pattern recognition software and a technician who knows how to use it. Melissa? Leah guessed. Yeah, figures, right? He handed the manila folder he was carrying to Riley, adding, she's our resident computer geek, and thank goodness we have her. One of those people with an inborn knack. Anyway, she's going to be concentrating on those blood spatters on the rocks, see if maybe we have something more deliberate there. Good enough. Riley opened the folder and began going over the postmortem report. Jake moved restlessly around the room for a minute or so, then took a seat at the table near Riley. Still no luck identifying the guy, he offered. Leah wanted to tell him to give Riley a chance to absorb the report she was reading, but kept her mouth shut. Without looking up and apparently still reading, Riley said, with no head and fingerprints not in the system, I'm not surprised. Still no missing persons report that matches, I gather. No missing persons reports at all. Is that unusual for this area? To have no reports? No, it's normal. We don't get too many missing, barring the occasional teenager staying out too late or drunken fishermen falling out of their boats. Deciding to speak up, Leah pointed out if he went missing on Sunday afternoon or early evening, it's less than 48 hours, unless he had somebody waiting for him at home, wherever that was. It's at least even money that nobody's noticed him missing, especially if he was here on vacation. Riley nodded. The needs of vacationers vary. Not everybody walks on the beach or visits the restaurants or shops. Some people come with a bag of books or briefcase full of work, park themselves in front of the view, order takeout delivered, and never leave their own little rented piece of sand until it's time for the drive home. If this guy came here alone, his absence may have stirred no more notice than his presence did. How are you doing that? Jake demanded. She looked at him over the top of the open folder. Doing what? Reading and talking. Are you just pretending to read? Leah kept her mouth shut again and just listened. No, Riley said, I'm reading. It's a knack I have. Another agent in the unit taught me. He grunted. Must come in handy. Sometimes. That's considered a masculine trait, isn't it? Being able to compartmentalize mentally or emotionally. I've heard it said. You don't agree? Never really thought about it. Riley's voice remained mild, and her slight smile was merely polite, but Leah was certain the other woman was perfectly well aware of what was going on. Jake was showing off one of his least attractive traits, one Leah had seen often enough to recognize. Quite simply, he was accustomed to women paying attention to him, no matter what else happened to be going on. Virtually all women, and that part of him disliked taking second place to another man or to a murder. Coming in third where Riley was concerned was obviously bugging the hell out of him. Leah made a silent bet with herself as to the direction Jake would steer the conversation. You're probably good with numbers too, he said. I am, Riley confirmed, still mild. I can also change the tire or the oil, use power tools skillfully, read any sort of map accurately, hit what I'm aiming at on the firing range or in the field, and I play a mean game of pool. Not bragging or anything, just saying. Poker, that too. A paragon, Jake said. Can you cook? Afraid not. I guess it's a good thing Ash can then, huh? Leah won her bet. Guess so, Riley shrugged. Doesn't really matter to you? Well, I usually live on takeout, so it's something new. I could get used to it. Jake was so transparently not pleased by that statement, and Leah nearly laughed, but not quite. He was, after all, her boss. Riley closed the folder and tapped the edge against her free hand. Getting back to the murder, with no good way to ID the body, I say our best bet is to look for a man who isn't where he's supposed to be. Starting from the easier end, summer visitors. That will be the quickest, the sheriff agreed. We can check with all the motels and realtors for a single guy renting a room, a condo, or a house. In this area, we tend to get more families and groups than singles, so it ought to narrow the field. I'll get my people on it. It's a start anyway. Riley offered the folder to Leah. Want to take a look? Pass. Wouldn't know what I was reading anyway. Riley smiled and returned the folder to Jake. Not much we don't already know. White male, approximately 40 to 45 years old, tortured and then decapitated. No tox screen results yet. Estimated time of death was between 2 and 6 a.m. Sunday night, or Monday morning, rather. Does that help, Leah wondered? Not really. Not without more to go on. Jake, may I see all the paperwork you've got on any of the other possibly related crimes this summer? The arson, vandalism, whatever else you have. Of course, he was all business now, the fray into her personal life seemingly forgotten. Looking for a common thread? Matter-of-factly, she said if there was one, your people probably would have seen it, unless it's occult-related. Those can be very subtle, and I wouldn't expect most cops to pick up on them. But you would? Maybe, maybe not, and she shook her head. Sorry to sound vague, but I haven't had a chance to do any research yet. Until I work up a list of possibly related occurrences and try to figure out what they have in common, research is tough and fairly useless. The occult is a broad topic. With a sigh, Jake said, "Yeah, I did an internet keyword search using human sacrifice." You wouldn't believe some of the shit that came up. Oh, I believe just about anything. Riley's voice was dry. But I'd rather start at the beginning, not with the end result. What do you mean? I mean that the preparations for an occult ceremony are every bit as important as the eventual outcome, possibly more so. Lee, you got it first. So if you find something out of place in the prep work, you'll be more inclined to believe the occult elements were used as a smokescreen. Exactly. Jake was frowning. That's what you think? Seriously? I think it's possible. You've been listening to Ash. Actually, I think he's convinced this murder has nothing to do with the occult. I'm not quite ready to rule it out just yet. I'm glad to hear that, Jake said. Thought I'd have to waste a lot of time arguing the possibility. I'm always open to possibilities, Riley said. There are usually plenty of them, and this case is no exception. Maybe it's a garden variety murder dressed up to look like something else. Or maybe it really is something else. It was Leah's turn to frown. Wait a minute. You said there wasn't much in the autopsy report we didn't already know. That's what I said. So there was something you didn't expect? One small thing, Riley agreed, the stomach contents. Jake looked at the closed folder he'd placed on the table, then back at Riley, his brows lifting. What about them? We don't have the tox screen yet, so we don't know if he was drugged or poisoned. Yeah, but what we do know is that his stomach was full of blood, and it wasn't his. Chapter 10. Riley bent to pick up a charred bit of wood and straightened, turning it in her hands. The house was under construction when it burned. Not much more than a shell, Jake confirmed. The roof was on, it was mostly closed in, but that was it. And it was being built by a construction company, not an individual. Yeah, a big company bought up a shitload of land on the island a few years ago, when one of the original owners finally sold out. They've been building on lots ever since. Usually have 2 or 3 houses going at the same time. Big crew. Insurance? What you'd expect, nothing excessive, Jake shrugged, and nothing crooked that I could find. They build a house and then sell it to either an individual, a co-op, or one of the properties groups that own rentals. Business as usual around here. Riley dropped the charred wood and absently brushed her hands together. And your fire marshal is sure it was arson? She was behaving as though this was her first visit here, although she had to assume that she'd been here to this site at least once before, and unbeknownst to the sheriff, this fire had, after all, been one of the unusual occurrences to rouse Gordon's suspicions this summer. So it only made sense that she had come here at some point. She might even have found something here to deepen or erase her own suspicions for all she knew. She didn't remember. An accelerant was used, Jake replied, and not something common like gasoline or lighter fluid. I don't have lab results on just what kind, but we're sure of that much. Anything else we're sure of? The question was straightforward and not at all sarcastic. Not a whole hell of a lot. It happened in the middle of the night, closer to dawn, really. Report called in by a neighbor who was up early to take his dog out. The fire was well underway, and nobody was seen here or running or driving away from here. Riley frowned at the blackened pilings intended to support the house well above the sandy ground, as required by code, and only parts of it still upright and recognizable. Around the base of the massive timbers were mounds of charred wood, some of them waist high, where the building had caved in on itself while burning. What are you thinking? Jake asked. She wished she knew. There was something very familiar about this, but she didn't know what it was, or even why it was. Maybe it just looked familiar because she'd stood here before, studied the debris of this fire before. Or maybe it was something else. Riley? Why did I get the feeling it's something else? I guess the fire marshal sifted through all this stuff she said, more to be saying something than because she had any real doubts. Twice. And then I had a closer look myself early yesterday, as a matter of fact. Except for signs of that accelerant I mentioned, neither of us saw anything that didn't belong here. Riley looked at him with a frown. Then why do you have this fire lumped in with the other unusual occurrences? Fires happen, arson happens. Thinking of the earlier conversation with Leah, she added, even in paradise, and burning a building doesn't play a part in any ritual I know of, so why do you believe this might have had something to do with occult practices? He sighed. Well, there was one unusual thing here. The fire marshal didn't notice, or at least didn't put it in his report, and I only found it yesterday. I haven't even had the chance to tell Ash, if you want the truth. Found what, Jake? He led the way through the mounds of rubble toward the beach side of the property, saying over his shoulder, the company wants to clear all this and start rebuilding, but their insurer's investigator apparently wants to take a look and won't cut them a check until he does. It's supposed to be here by the end of the week, otherwise all this would be cleared out by now. An awful lot of things appear to be happening, or were supposed to happen by the end of the week, Riley thought, conscious of a new prickle of unease, as if a clock were ticking off the moments until something, she didn't know what, or whose clock it was, or even if it mattered, damn it. But all she said, calmly, was, I'm not surprised the insurer wants to take a look if an accelerant was used. I gather it was one of those rare policies that actually covers arson, but only if no evidence points to the company. Yeah, buildings under construction are tempting targets for arsonists, and having a special rider on the policy is usually less expensive than hiring security to watch the place 24/7 all during construction. But the insurers take a harder look when something like this happens, of course. Personally, I don't see how the builder would profit from a fire, not at this stage. The policy is one designed just for a building in progress, so at any given time it only covers what the company can prove it's cost them up to that point. Sensible. Yeah, and pretty much stops some unscrupulous builder from throwing up shoddy workmanship and then burning it and claiming the loss as market value. Apparently, you've got to have the paperwork to back up your claims of cost, actual cost of materials and manpower, not appraised value when finished. That sort of policy keeps the cost down for the builder, but still makes it so they don't lose their shirts if something happens during construction. I bet it saved the insurance company some major bucks too. Jake, where are we going? Here. He stopped near the edge of the dunes, which presently hid their view of the ocean, and over which a wooden walkway had already been partially constructed, with more thick pilings sunk deeply into the sand. Ignoring the "Stay off the dunes" signs posted liberally up and down the beach and near every walkway, Jake stepped behind a piling and crouched down. Almost missed it, he said. Riley joined him, going down on one knee in the soft sand and stared at the rough surface of the massive post. I don't suppose it could be natural, she said. No, found the same thing at the abandoned building that burned in Castle last week. I'd say this was a brand, or at the very least made with something hot enough to burn the wood. After a moment, Riley reached out and traced a very clear shape that did indeed look as though it had been deliberately charred into the surface of the post. an inverted cross. It was nearly lunchtime when Riley and the sheriff finished what little they could do at the second arson site, an abandoned building on the outskirts of downtown Castle. What little they could do having consisted of looking at a burned-out hulk of a building that had once been a small store and studying the inverted cross that had been burned into an otherwise untouched plank jammed upright into the ground and left conspicuously behind the building. Not very subtle, Riley murmured as they headed back toward the street. Was it supposed to be? Jake asked. I mean, isn't a sign supposed to be, well, a sign? A sign of what? Here there be devil worshippers? Most practitioners keep pretty quiet about it, Jake. That group down the beach from you has been vocal, which led Riley to believe that they were likely to be harmless, more apt to be on the candles and chanting, quote-unquote, conventional end of Satanism, rather than out on the extreme fringes where blood rituals and attempts to harness the elements or some supernatural force were practiced. But all she said was, leaving signs of occult activity for outsiders to find isn't smart unless you have a very good reason. He frowned. Okay, then maybe a warning of some kind? I guess it's possible. She couldn't seem to think clearly, and Riley was aware of another chill of unease. How many power bars had she eaten since breakfast? 2? 3? That should have been enough, more than enough. For Christ's sake, it wasn't as though she'd been running an obstacle course. Are you okay? Jake demanded. You've been acting sort of weird all morning. Have I? Yes, you have, and that wasn't an answer. What the hell's going on with you? She wouldn't have pegged the handsome sheriff as being particularly sensitive to undercurrents, which told her that it was only too screamingly obvious something unusual was going on with her. Great. That was just great. She really couldn't fake it anymore, apparently. Falling back on the tried and true, she said, I'm different when I'm working, that's all. No offense, Riley, but if this is you working, I don't know how much help you're going to be to this investigation. Despite the beginning of that sentence, his tone was aggressive and his entire attitude impatient, and it didn't take any extra senses to tell Riley he was in the mood to pick a fight. Probably, she thought, because needling her at the station hadn't achieved whatever results he'd been after. She wondered now if she'd stopped dating Jake less because she'd met and been attracted to Ash, and more because she really didn't have much time for men who believed they were God's gift. Under different circumstances, she probably would have given him the argument he so clearly wanted to start, but today she simply didn't have the energy for it. In any case, he was distracted before Riley had to come up with some kind of response, and she didn't know whether to be relieved or irritated when the distraction proved to be Ash. His Hummer was parked beside Jake's Jeep out on the street. How'd he even know where we were? Jake muttered. He didn't have to know, Riley pointed out mildly. All he had to do was drive the few blocks between here and the courthouse and look for your Jeep. Jake grimaced. Yeah, sometimes I forget how small this place really is. I wouldn't think you could hide much here, she agreed. You ever lived in a small town? Riley nodded. Then you know that there are secrets everybody in the entire town knows, and then there are secrets that stay that way, sometimes for generations. True enough. Something was nagging at her mind, had been for at least the last hour, but Riley couldn't make it come clear. Something about one of the arson sites, something Jake had said, a memory trying to surface. She didn't know. Whatever it was, it remained maddeningly elusive. It's like an echo of something I only half heard in the first place. How the hell am I supposed to figure out what it was? Especially with her Swiss cheese memory and still dulled senses. Ash had gotten out when he saw them approaching and when they joined him on the sidewalk. Asked Riley, "Any ideas about our mysterious arsonist?" "Nothing helpful, I'm afraid," she replied, pushing the useless worries out of her mind for the moment. "Still think it could be some kind of occult activity?" "I still can't rule it out," Riley shrugged. "I've got to do some research, see if any of this fits any known pattern." "Would you expect it to?" "Well, yeah, at least to some extent. There are basic tenets to every religion, every belief system. The bells and whistles may change over the years, and some strong leaders may invent their own rituals or their own methods of conducting them, but the broad outlines tend to stay the same." It was Jake who said, and in occult practices, the broad outlines would be all Black occult rituals center around the theme of summoning supernatural power to effect a change. Supernatural power? Like magic? His scornful questions didn't surprise Riley. Neither the paranormal nor any supernatural force or forces were a part of most people's lives, so ignorance abounded. She had, in fact, grown accustomed to explaining to perfectly intelligent people that paranormal had nothing to do with vampires or werewolves, and that magic could mean something other than illusion or the twitch of a TV witch's nose. So, patiently, she said, in this context, supernatural power would be the energy forces of nature, of the elements: wind, water, earth, fire. In occult rituals, magic, that elemental energy is created or summoned and then channeled, directed toward a specific end. Ash said, "So somebody burned down 2 buildings to what? Harness the energy of the fire for their own purposes?" "It's possible, Ash. You don't sound too sure of that." Riley was perfectly aware of Jake frowning at her and wondering if he was once again thinking that she was being little help to his investigation, but she kept her gaze on Ash. "A fire used in occult practices is common, even a bonfire. But a burning building, I'd call that excessive. And I haven't a clue why someone would need that much energy, or would believe they could harness it if they had it. There's always a purpose in any ritual, and so far I see no purpose for all this. So no, I'm not sure how, or even if these fires are connected to any occult practices that may or may not be taking place in Hazard County." He grunted. "You sound like you're on the witness stand." "I've been there a few times." "Yeah, I figured." Riley looked at the sheriff. "I'll have to do some research before I can even speculate much more. Maybe get in touch with a couple of experts back at the office." "There are experts on the occult in the FBI?" "A few, yeah." She was one of those, but was still reasonably sure she hadn't shared that knowledge with the sheriff. She was less sure about Ash, but since he didn't say anything, she didn't worry about it, at least for the moment. "My tax dollars at work," Jake muttered. "You may be glad of their expertise before this is over," Riley told him. "Because if somebody is killing people and burning down buildings as part of occult rituals, you have a serious, serious problem on your hands." With a sigh, Jake said, "I have that even if none of this is occult related." "Trust me, if it's occult related, it's worse." But Riley didn't say it out loud and wasn't sure why. Ash said to her, "I gather you copied a friend at Quantico on the post-mortem results?" She nodded, with Jake's permission, of course, a couple of hours ago. "Your friend works fast. I stopped by the station after I left the courthouse, and Leah gave me a message to pass on. Apparently your cell phone is off or dead. Damn. She didn't bother to check her bag, knowing she had turned the phone on before leaving the house. It was dead. And losing its charge even faster than what was normal for her. Yet another sign of things out of whack in her world. To Jake, Ash added, "Your phone seems to be off as well." I left it in the Jeep. Good thing there was no emergency requiring the sheriff. We're a block and a half from the station, Ash. Somebody could have stuck their head out of one of the doors and yelled for me. Riley wasn't in the mood for pissing contests, so she stopped this one before it could really get going by saying to Ash the message. He looked at her. Short and fairly enigmatic. Quote, "First test, human. Second test, same type as donor." End quote. Hope it means more to you than it does to me. Riley laced her fingers together around the strap of her shoulder bag, hoping neither man would notice them shaking, or would simply believe she was just in need of calories if they did notice, but that wasn't why. The message was all too clear to her. The blood on the clothing she'd awakened wearing the previous afternoon was human, and the blood type was the same as that found in their victim's stomach. Which meant it was pretty damn likely there was another murder victim out there somewhere. Someone whose blood Riley had been covered in. Is it something Jake should know about? Ash asked as he drove Riley to the cafe where they'd planned to have lunch. They had left behind a frustrated sheriff who wasn't at all happy that she wasn't willing to completely decipher the message from Quantico. He already knows what's important. His own Emmy told him that the blood in the victim's stomach is human, but doesn't belong to the victim, which means there's probably another victim we haven't found yet. So why did your pal at Quantico have to verify that? I can't think. Why can't I think? She needed fuel, of course, yet again, which was one reason she hadn't protested Ash's arrival at the arson scene. She needed fuel, and once she had that, once her energy level was optimal, then she could begin to make sense of the bits and pieces of information scattered in her mind. Occult activity, possibly. Arson, definitely. Murder, definitely. Probably two of them, damn it. Connection, who knows? Replying finally to Ash's question, she said, "Just making sure, that's all." "Riley, what aren't you telling me?" She took a chance. A lot. Ash didn't seem surprised by that. Or else he had a great poker face on. I see. Professional reasons or personal ones? Taking another chance, she answered honestly. Sort of. 6 of one, half a dozen of the other. I'm sorry, Ash, it's just I'm used to working alone, and I'm not used to being personally involved with someone while I'm working. I told you that. And I can't read you at all. Can't tell what you're thinking or feeling. But I look at you and feel uneasy. Uneasy, and I don't know why. And I'm the DA of Hazard County. That too. I can't just tell you everything I know, or think I know, or suspect, not without evidence to back it up. Without evidence, it's just speculation, useless speculation. And most of it's probably dead ends anyway, because most investigations are full of them. That's one reason I haven't told Jake much of what I'm thinking either. Because he'd grab what might look like a lead and run with it. Focus all his suspicions on one person or one area to the exclusion of all else. Rush to judgment. Riley was glad Ash seemed to understand that. She nodded. He's the type, or at least I think he is, wants to do something ASAP, frustrated because he can't. He's more than ready for concrete answers, and that would be fine if I was right. But I'm not sure of anything yet. Until I am sure, or at least reasonably sure, I'd rather keep most of the speculation to myself. After a moment, Ash said in a deliberate tone, "The danger in that is your isolation, Riley. Keep everything to yourself, and if the murderer even suspects you might know something, he could also believe that taking you out would eliminate, or at least lessen the threat." "I know," she said. "You're willing to risk that?" "I usually do." "Usually, but not always." Because Bishop tended to know, even if she hadn't told him, what was going on in her investigations, in her life, hell, in her mind. Other team members often knew as well because, hey, hard to keep most things secret among a group of psychics. But not this time. With Bishop and the other members of the unit obviously preoccupied with their own demanding cases and scattered across the country to boot, the sense of unity she had felt since joining the SCU was missing. Or maybe that was just her, just the disconnect of her own dulled or missing senses. Either way, this time the inherently risky nature of her job felt more dangerous than ever. This time she felt alone. Really alone. "I don't know that I'm willing to risk it," Ash said in a thoughtful tone, then almost immediately added, "As a matter of fact, I'm sure I'm not willing to risk you, Riley." "Ash, yes, I know your job is dangerous no matter what the circumstances. Situation normal for you. I also know you're highly trained by the Army and by the FBI, which means you can more than take care of yourself in just about any situation I can name, including, undoubtedly, this one. And I know you've done just fine without me for 30-odd years." He pulled the Hummer into a parking space outside a busy cafe, turned off the engine, and looked at her steadily. "But I am asking you in this investigation, in this place and time, just this once, to break a few of your rules and talk to me about what's going on." "It's never just once," she murmured. "Break a rule, and before you know it, life is chaos. You're running with scissors, coloring outside the lines, putting your elbows on the table. Anarchy." "Quit stalling." "Look, I can separate personal confidences from my professional responsibilities." "I'm not sure I can," she admitted. "I'm sure. Trust me, Riley." Hating the gambit, Riley nevertheless fell back on a handy excuse and tried to keep it light. "It's not fair to ask anything of me when I'm starving and can't think straight. You don't want to win that way, do you?" Ash said, "I'm willing to win any way I can. Haven't you figured that out yet?" He didn't press her for a response just then, which was good since Riley didn't really have one. Instead, he got out of the vehicle, and as she followed suit, Riley was aware of the unsettling realization that she was going to have to decide whether to trust Ash completely, and decide without the aid of the extra senses she had counted on her entire life. Blind trust. Something she wasn't at all sure she was capable of.